Hi, this is George Alger with OurVentura TV, and today I'm speaking with Ron Whitehurst, who is a pest control advisor, and we're going to be speaking about Proposition 37. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Ron, we want to get right into Prop 37, but before we do, can you just give me a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. I'm a pest control advisor working with Rincon, Vitova, and Sectors. It's a 60-year-old company that has been working to help farmers develop biological control measures to control the pests naturally in their crops, in a wide range of crops. For example, for corn and cotton, there are 4 levels of biological controls that effectively control the worm pests in those crops. So this is what motivated us to get involved with the Label GMO campaign, is that we know that there are effective, natural, safe ways of controlling these pests in these crops without resorting to using genetically engineered corn and cotton.
Wow. Okay, well, let's get right into Prop 37, and we're going to cut this down to the real basic points because not everyone knows what it is. So please tell us, what is Prop 37?
Proposition 37 is a state initiative that calls for labeling, a simple little label on the packages of food in the grocery store that says, contains genetically engineered ingredient. This will give us, the consumer, a way of easily figuring out what's in our food. 80% of consumers say that they don't want to eat genetically engineered foods. They at least want it labeled so they can select these things in the market. So why don't we have labels? The current food policy czar of the FDA is Michael Taylor, an ex-vice president of Monsanto company. They control about 80% of the market of genetically engineered crops in the United States. And so this is literally a case of the fox guarding the hen house. So we're not getting effective regulation of these foods when they come out. There have been no third-party safety studies of any of the genetically engineered foods on the market. So what's in these things? We don't really have any really good idea. There are short-term animal feeding studies that suggest that there's toxicity to the liver and to the kidney, the main detoxification organs in the body, and there's changes in the lining of the intestine. So there's indications that these things are not good for us. And what's happened with our kids in the last 15 years since these have been on the market? More allergies, ADHD, diabetes, obesity, and strange digestive problems. It doesn't speak well. In Japan, when these foods became available, they said, oh, I don't know, why don't we wait and see what happens to the American kids when they eat this stuff before we feed this to our kids? Well, they're sure now that they don't want these in their country, so they require labeling in their country, and they try to exclude genetically engineered foods coming into their country.
And to ensure that we're also touching on an obvious point to a very fundamental point, what is the purpose of genetically modifying the food in the first place?
Well, the purpose is to make money. That you have this seed that farmers have been working for 10,000 years to develop this particular plant, such as a corn plant, that this has been the product of a very careful selection over many, many millennia of farmers very carefully selecting this plant to produce a lot of food for us. And somebody comes along, they insert 1 or 2 new genes into the plant, and then they patent it. That gives them the ability to control that plant and to restrict other people from growing it, if it's off of their patent requirements and so on. So it's straightforward, a way of controlling and dominating the seed industry. So it's making lots of money for Monsanto and other biotech companies now. But to be able to make that money, they're relying on us not knowing that it's in our food supply. There have been very strong efforts to suppress any information. There's just recently some reports about the 2 Fox News reporters that did a study on the RGBH, the growth hormone that's put into cows so they produce more milk. And they looked into that, found all kinds of problems. They were ready to put together the report. They let Monsanto look over the report they had done. Monsanto was outraged. They'd originally suggested they look at that, so they could, report positively on it. But when they found that the report was going to be negative, they squelched the report, and the reporters wound up being fired. And so there's just one example of many examples of how the media has been, the media reports of problems with this food have been suppressed. So we're not getting a fair and balanced, we don't have a free and open marketplace. So knowledge about these foods, their impacts on people's health, and the negative effects on the environment, have not been out there. So we're talking about this now. So in that sense, we have already won. That Monsanto, Dow, Syngenta don't want us talking about that there's problems with the food. So we're talking about it now. So in that sense, we've already won a major victory. We collected 970,000 signatures on petitions to get this on the ballot. So now we, as citizens of the state, have the ability to vote. See, if we want to redefine the marketplace, at least in California, that the consumers want to know if the food in this package on this shelf or the vegetables in the bin at the grocery store contain genetically engineered ingredients.
Doesn't sound like much to ask, but why is there even a necessity of a vote? Because since we need, I thought because the food labeling is supposed to tell us what's inside it,
right.
Why is a vote needed?
Yeah. This is simple. It's just a label on the food. It's not rocket science. It would seem like it'd be real simple to be able to just, call up our congressman and say, hey, this is what we want. Back in 1996, there was 500,000 signatures. This was when you had to scroll on a piece of paper. Remember those days? Yeah, 500,000 signatures were submitted to the FDA, saying we want labeling of our food. That if it has genetically engineered content, we want that on the label. That was ignored. Just lately, about 1 million signatures were collected and delivered to the FDA, requesting labeling. Of course, it went to Michael Taylor, ex-VP of Monsanto, so I'm sure he was impressed. So, just lately, last year, there was a bill in our state legislature to require labeling of the genetically engineered salmon. This would be the first genetically engineered animal that would be coming into the food supply, and couldn't get that out of committee until there was massive outcry to the health committee that we wanted, this food labeled. So it got out of the health committee and it went to the budget committee, and it was squashed and will never see the light of day. So we have been trying to work through our elected representatives. So Will Rogers, a famous comedian, once said that we've got the best legislature that money can buy. So unfortunately, we seem to have lost control of our government, that it's now mostly for and by corporations instead of for and by we the people. And so this is a simple thing. It just requires a little label on the food that says contains genetically engineered ingredients. And that will transform the marketplace. And it's a simple thing to ask.
So I take it it's not illegal that a past VP of Monsanto would be in charge of the FDA. To me, it seems like there's based on what you're saying, a conflict of interest.
Sure. Well, of course, who else would know better how to regulate, one of these big industries than somebody who's worked in it, right? It makes sense, right? But the revolving door in Washington is a very common expression, that it's very common for people who were involved in one corporation go into the branch of government that is supposed to monitor and regulate that corporation. It's called regulatory capture. It's very common, and it's suggested that we still have three branches of government. We've got oil, pesticides and pharmaceuticals, and banking. That we still have some balance in the government, from these different corporations. So we need to regain control of our food supply, and this is a very simple, cost-effective way of doing it.
Good. Now that you brought up the cost aspect of it, I mean, for me, again, I'm still a little astounded that it would be any issue at all to get the label on there. But
Yes,
having brought this to light here, is this? I mean, what does this mean when you say it's cost effective? I mean, what is involved in putting a label on a food? Is this Does this mean millions for a state that's not doing well financially, or what is the fiscal ramifications of this?
Okay. Food manufacturers changes their labels every day. So just recently there were the little labels that came onto the packages. No trans fat. And earlier there was gluten, indicating if it has gluten in it. There's a growing number of people with allergies to gluten. And so these labels came onto the package. They had to source different materials, and they had to change the label. I haven't noticed the price of that food coming up. So there will be no increase in price on, for the packaged food to the consumer. In Europe, we went through this process 15 years ago, and there was no increase in the price of food. There's no indication, that will be a case. The grocers, if they're found to have a product that's mislabeled, that if it has genetically engineered content in it and it's not labeled, then they'll be given 30 days to make good. They'll give you another package of something that doesn't have genetic engineered ingredients. They'll take the product off their shelves. They'll relabel it and that sort of thing. Usually they'll just call up their supplier and say, hey, you need to get the labels on here. So in the transition, there may be a little bit of cost involved in that, but there's from the time of the election to the time when they're required to have the labels on the food is a year and a half, 18 months. And so it's plenty of time. I would hate to think about it, all the packages of food that are sitting around the grocery store for a year and a half. So it's plenty of time to work stuff out of the system. And so the labels, relate to whether it has genetically engineered content or not. The big cost is the big negative impact is going to be on Monsanto. Think about it. If you're a major food manufacturer and you're required to put on this label of this package of food that this contains an ingredient that 80% of the consumers say, we don't want this stuff. You're not going to put a label that's got genetically engineered ingredients on it. You're going to put another label on that says GMO free, because they're selling products to the consumers. If the consumers don't buy them, it doesn't make sense for them to put them on the market. The processed food industry is a highly competitive marketplace, and companies live and die on a few percentage points of market share. And so they are going to scramble, and they're going to get the genetically engineered ingredients worked out of the recipes. They're going to change the recipes, they're going to change the labels, and they're going to do it easily in the 18 months that they have to do it. The problem then comes is that if they're not buying this stuff, then the farmers won't grow it. If the farmers are not going to grow it, then they won't be buying the genetically engineered seeds from Monsanto, Dow, Syngenta, Bayer. And so those companies are going to take a major economic hit. So where's your money? Are you invested in Monsanto stock? Do you have a retirement fund in that? I think I would suggest that you dump the Monsanto stock now, because once this bill passes, and California's a significant state, it's 12% of GDP. And so food manufacturers are not going to make a separate label for California. They're going to make one label for the United States, and it's going to be, non-GMO. And so this is an effective mechanism that's very innocent, very simple, to move these products out of the marketplace. There was an editorial just recently that this is going to be meaningless because we will require labeling on most of the packaged food in the grocery store. But as I've suggested, if required to, the food manufacturers will not put on the label that this has stuff that Nobody wants to eat. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, oh, I'm going to go out and buy some genetically engineered food. At least I haven't, have you?
Jeez. Wow. Well, Ron, this is an important topic, and we've run out of time, but could you advise our viewers on a website where they could find out more information?
Yeah, California Right to Know, CARIGHTOKNOW.org, has a wonderful wealth of information on it relating to genetically engineered foods, food safety, and that sort of thing. And Responsible Technology is another institute that looks at genetically engineered foods. They've been doing this for a decade. And there's a wealth of information on that. That's responsibletechnology.org, no punctuation.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show to speak about this topic, and thank you for your efforts to, to enlighten the public on what's going on with their food and the labeling.
I appreciate the opportunity to tell you about this.
All right. Well, this is George Alger signing off for another segment of Our Ventura TV. Until we see you again.